Yeah, we're live. So 6:59, even got it in right on the buzzer, right before the buzzer. Tonight, we're going to talk about a couple things. One is the topic for tonight is, should I have a bigger turbo ready? What do you guys think? On the 3800 Big Bang, I've been going over that because I just did a video on it, and I'm going to be loading that video up. It's all edited, ready to go. I wasn't able to load it before we started this because I didn't want to multitask there. But I have a video going up on the 3800 looking back at the NA power output and the turbo power output, and also going over lots of things. And if you guys are interested, I have a bunch of things that I'm going to sell off after I do the Big Bang thing. And even before that, some of the stuff can go because I'm not going to rerun that motor again. So I have, like, for instance, the Gen 5 blower with the 2.6 pulley on it, the hub on it, and I have a 3-inch pulley and a 3.8 pulley. And so that thing made 450 odd horsepower. So we know that the supercharger is good. So that will be a good upgrade for somebody in the 3800 community. Also, I have both camshafts. I have the NIC camshaft and the slightly smaller comp cam. Both of them did very well. Both of those are going to go away because I'm going to put a different camshaft in to run the Big Bang motor. I am going to get rid of one of the sets of heads that were redone, valve job surface. I put LS3 or LS6 springs in them, so they're ready to go for a cam upgrade if you put the heads on. So those will be ready to go. They are not the ones that are in the thumbnail, although they could be the ones that are in the thumbnail, because that's going to be the poll for tonight. So let's get the poll going early so we get a lot of action on. So we get a lot of action on the poll. It just writes itself. So the question for tonight is, should I have a new set of 3800 V6 heads ported? And for those of you that might not be familiar with what happened when I ran the thing last time, it made a lot of power. I mean, we made over 600 horsepower at 14.5 pounds of boost. So the thing was doing very well with the turbo, despite the fact that my turbo kit consisted of the stock exhaust manifolds feeding a, low buck Gt45 turbo. We're going to talk a little bit about that too, because that's going to be the other topic for tonight. But when I ran it with a set of ported heads that were done by a local shop. And they're not known for head porting, so they came out. They're good, but they're not what they could be. So my question is, I'm gonna have a cam made because I tried to source another cam for it, and the ZZP and the Intense guys, the turbo cams that they have, I don't like. So I need to look at maybe some of the NA cams and see if there's something that I would think that I would feel comfortable with using the turbo. I want something that's going to be high 220s on the intake and mid to high 230s on the exhaust, or even low 230s on the intake. I just need to check and piston to valve clearance to make sure that I have enough piston to valve clearance. But I don't want something that's 116 or 118 degree lobe separation angle, which they tend to do for some of these blower applications. So I wouldn't mind running that kind of blower cam if it had a tighter LSA. And I know every cam is a turbo cam. But if I'm picking the cam that I get to put in there, I'm going to put one in there that's going to make more NA power. And although now that I think about it, now that I say that out loud, it might actually make more sense to put the blower-ish cam on there, because that's going to soften power down low and make the power out at the top. So maybe I should think about that. Maybe that will work out okay. Because I don't really care about boost response. So that's the thing. That's why we have these things. That's why I say these things out loud, and that we all learn from it. Especially me, I learn from myself. So I might think about that. And that might be a good way to go. It's be like putting the LS9 cam in a 4.8, because all you care about is like the big end, and that still makes power up there. But my question is, when we ran the thing before, I had those ported set of heads. We ran the NIC cam, which is not the most optimum combination. I also ran the factory blower lower intake manifold with a gutted blower housing. Again, not optimum. I'm thinking that I can get 300 horsepower NA from this thing. I would think it would do that. And then obviously I have to put ring gap in it and head studs and MLS head gaskets, and then put the turbo on and run the turbo. I'm thinking about running the turbo with the headers on it rather than the turbo, because I think that will help. And then we'll run it with ice water and stuff and make some good power. So my question is, for the poll for tonight, I ran these other ported heads and they worked okay. We made good power, but should I go to the trouble of having another set? Now, Eric offered to do these. I don't want to send Eric these iron heads. I'm going to choose somebody else to do it. Maybe Turbo Monza, if he's up for it. He's already done some other heads and offered to do the Cadillac heads, which is a no-go. I'm not porting Cadillac heads, or I'm not having somebody else, even if they were doing it for free. I'm not having them port the Cadillac heads. But I might be interested in having him do these 3800 heads, because even with what I did, I know that there's more power to be had there. So the poll for tonight is, should I send this other set of heads that I have, this other set of 3800 heads, should I send those heads and have it ported before I do the Big Bang? For the Big Bang test. Should I have a new set of 3800 V6 heads ported for the Big Bang test? Let's see what everybody has to say. I mean, honestly, we're just trying to ruin the motor anyway. But as I said, I've got, I'll have another set of heads that have been ported and are ready to go. So if somebody's interested and you have a 3800 and you're interested in a ported set of heads, these have been machined, valve job, surfaced. They've got springs on them. They're ready to go. So there'll be a good upgrade for somebody. I have the cams. I have the Gen 5 blower with the hub on it with different pulleys on it, so you can use all that stuff. What else? Oh, the other thing I have are intake manifolds, because I got the composite front wheel drive manifold. I got the aluminum front wheel drive manifold, and you can take the guts out of it and have it be a short runner one. Somebody loaned me the inserts, so those are not for sale. I'm going to send those back. And I'm only selling the things that I bought. I bought all the stuff from the wrecking yard. I bought those cams. I paid for the heads. I did all that stuff. So the heads have LS3 or LS6 springs on them, which is more than enough to run these kinds of camshafts. It works very well. So if you are in the market and you're a 3800 guy, I'll put my email address down here. You can send me an email, and then I'm going to put the video out. And it also talks a little bit about that. So AOL.com. Killer B16. So that's it. So now the topic for tonight is the Gt45 Turbo. We know from past experience, I've made close to 800 with that in all of it mode. I think honestly, it's more like a 700 or 750 horsepower turbo. But honestly, I haven't tried to run that turbo on something small and efficient, at least not at the top of its like flow range. So I did run it on the K24, which of all of the applications, it would probably make the most power on that motor. And so if I was going to make a lot of power, that would have been the one to turn it up on. But we only ran like 600 or 620 or something with that, because we were running them all at a fairly low boost level. I think only 13 or 14 pounds. Same thing on the V6. We ran 14.5 pounds. And in the video, I talk about the fact that we more than doubled the NA power output. And so I'm still trying to figure out why. And I want to rerun the NA motor. I want the NA motor to make more power. And it's going to, because depending on how this, on how the ported head question goes. So you guys will decide. This poll will actually decide whether I do the ported head or not. So vote accordingly. If you want me to have the head ported, I will do a new head for it, or new heads for it, and then hopefully make a bit more power. I'm also going to port the lower intake manifold, and I'm making an adapter plate that I can put the Holley elbow on with a 102 millimeter throttle body. And so that should make more than enough power. I'm hoping that it makes 300 NA. That's kind of my goal. And if it does that, and we still get the kind of gains that we saw, it's going to be, it will be impressive. So my question is, given that, if that's going to happen, even if we just go up at the level that we go up, because there's some cool math in there that talked about horsepower per pound of boost and how that number actually changes depending on how you calculate it. So there's some really cool stuff. But even given what we were doing before with the combination that we had before, which I don't think is by any means ideal, it wasn't making the NA power that I wanted it to. If we get to make more NA power, we turn the boost up. Do you think that we would get to the limit of the Gt45 Turbo before we get to the limit of something in the stock bottom end? Am I going to have a, another turbo in the bullpen, kind of ready to go in at a moment's notice, like the VS Racing 7875 that I have, or the Gen 2 mode, the turbo, or an S475, which I have two of them. I have a T4 and a T6. I would more than likely choose the T4 for the 3800. I have a Force Performance turbo. I can borrow that S480 from Freiburg. I mean, we have turbos that could take us to 1200 horsepower or more. So the next step up from the GT45 is something that would definitely take us to wherever that 3800 is going to go. So what do you guys think? Do you think that you think we'll get past the GT45 in terms of power? If you look at what the thing was doing and how it was tracking before, even with that combination, which again, it was a gutted blower housing on top of a stock blower lower intake manifold with those heads and an NIC, blower camshaft. We were tracking 30 plus horsepower per pound of boost. So we'd have been at 700 with another 3 pounds. So less than 20 pounds, we'd have been at 700 horsepower. And then at 800, if we were to ran 21 or 22 pounds, we probably would have been at 800 horsepower. So that would have been up near where the GT45 is going to, I think the 3800 is going to be beyond the GT45. So let me know what you guys think. If you think that if you think we need to have a bigger turbo, I have one ready. I mean, I have several at the waiting, and they're all T4s. So we have the ability to go up, and then we're going to run the long tube or their tubular headers, which I think will probably help. I would almost like to do it with the stock exhaust manifolds, because I know that there's lots of myths out there in 3800 land where guys think that front exhaust manifold is just too restrictive and it would build up too much back pressure, and I'll bet you that's not the case. I bet that with a stock exhaust feeding the turbo, that this thing would make 800 or 900 or 1,000 horsepower. I don't think that stock exhaust would hold back the power number under boost with the turbo. I honestly don't. It would be an interesting test to kind of compare the two, compare if there's any change in back pressure between the stock exhaust manifold and the turbos, or between the stock exhaust manifolds and the tubular headers with the turbo at a very high power level at 700 or 800 horsepower. It'd be interesting to see if there's actually something there, or if what usually happens, that the turbo itself is kind of controlling what happens in terms of back pressure. We see some situations where there's back pressure created by the design of the exhaust, the Hawley thing for the LS, where they have to merge together into a single outlet. And that's not the way that they have to merge it because of packaging. I think that's kind of restrictive, and we should probably see some back pressure there. But it would be interesting on this one to see if that stock exhaust manifold is as bad as they say it is, because in all the testing, every time I've ever tested these tubular headers versus the stock ones at any kind of power level, I haven't seen a big change in power. I haven't seen them yet be, there, even 10 I would take, which would be awesome. But I certainly haven't seen 20 or 30, a handful maybe in some cases. But I would like to see more than that. So let me know what you guys think about on the turbo question. Let's see how our poll is doing so far. Should I have a new set of 3800 V6 heads ported for the Big Bang test? We're looking at 71% saying yes and 28% saying no. So right now it's leaning toward the yes side. So we'll have to see what happens. I would like to, as a matter of fact, after I get off, I'll send Turbo Monza. I think that's what it is. I'll send him a message and see. And tomorrow I might be going up to yank a 5.3 out of a truck, which would be awesome, because it's like going to the wrecking yard, except it's happening in front of somebody's house, which will also be good. So I might do a video with that too, because it's a viewer. So are you measuring back pressure on the 3800? Yes, I will be when we run the test. What happened to the GM inline 6-cylinder? The 4200 is still going to happen. Yeah, I try to measure whenever I can. We try to measure back pressure and boost pressure so that we have and we can compare those two. I like much like running the. If you take a look at the video that I posted on the 4.8 liter, on the 5.3 liter, the L33 with the T6 S475, when we were comparing the Truck Norris cam to the Sloppy Stage 2 cam, if you look, we ran turbos on both of those at about 630 horsepower, something like that. I have back pressure there, and I think we're going to see a similar thing with a 3800, depending on what size turbo we use. I don't know that we'll see a lot of back pressure in that system because the turbos are pretty good size for that kind of displacement and that kind of power output. If every cam is a turbo cam, does it mean every cam is a boost cam? Yeah, I've shown that before. Like we've run the 265 comp cam, which is not a turbo cam or a blower cam or an NA cam, or it's more of an NA cam. I would actually classify it more as a truck cam. But back in the day, we ran that cam with a centrifugal supercharger, with nitrous, ran NA, and I think did we all? I don't think we ran it. I don't think I ran it with a turbo. I just wanted to run it with boost and with nitrous and run it NA. I don't know if I've ever run that 265 with a turbo, but it's just like running a truck cam with a turbo. It would work with a turbo. It would work with a roots blower. They all work with all the stuff. Gunther, I'm looking at LS3 block tomorrow. Should I pull the trigger on it for 800? It's already 5 over. You can't really go very big on those, so I'd make sure that thing is straight. If you had to buy a new LS3 block, it would be really expensive. The only turbo manufacturers that got back to me on the turbo thing was Summit, actually. Complete waste of time and money porting those heads. I would disagree with that. Even though we didn't see much from the set that I tested, ported heads can improve power quite a bit. Hate showing up late. How much horsepower is a GT45 good for? The most I've ever made is like 770 or 780, I think, with the GT45. I've had a few Grand Nationals. I'll tell you, they're very hard to beat and easy to get power out of. This is not a Grand National motor. This is a later one. This is a 3800 Series 2, and in one case, a Series 3. So it's a hydraulic roller cam, different head. It's if anything, it's actually a better motor than the Grand National motor. GT45 makes 45 psi. I don't think I've ever seen that. The combustion chambers in the 3800 head need some help. Do they need to be polished or something? What I did on the chambers when I ported the one intake and exhaust and combustion chamber is I unshrouded the valves, and I think for a high power turbo application, like polishing the chamber might not be a bad idea too. If it's a max effort, why not run the larger turbo? We probably will. I'm thinking the 1,000 horsepower turbo is the way to go. Run the 7875. I've had good luck with that. We ran that on the K Series Honda also. Too bad I can't loan you my aluminum heads for the test. That would be good, although I do believe you'll see some gain from porting. I think so too. I mean, I think when the engine is in a situation to take advantage of the extra airflow offered by the head, I think good things happen. We see that with LS motors and big blocks and small blocks and everything really. Does LV3 4.9 have any aftermarket cams like the Truck Norris? I don't think it's a 4.9. It's a 4.3, right? And I think Brian Tooley might be working on cams for that. Do you have any trouble burning out O2 sensors, and what wideband are you using? We're using Oh, what is the? It's not a Hariba, I don't think. I can't remember now what Westech has, but Eric has rewired it to accept the Holley O2 sensors. And there is a service life for the O2 sensors, especially if you run, leaded race fuel in them. I'm confused. Why don't manufacturers port and polish the heads from the start? Because they're not looking for extra power. There's no need for that. They never do OEMs when they're building a production engine. Do they look for maximum power? The engineers can make a lot more power out of a 3800 V6, for instance, or a turbo rotary, or anything else. But their design goal for an engine for an OEM application is, okay, here's our power level. Okay, that's really easy for us to reach. I mean, if you look at an LS3, look, we've got cylinder heads that support 650 horsepower. You're only asking us to make 435. So that's really easy. But it has to fulfill a lot of other requirements. It has to get good mileage. It has to last a long time. It has to be easy to assemble. It has to idle well. It has to have good street manners. It has to have all kinds of other things that have nothing to do with power. Was there a test done on a 3800 comparing stock manifolds and aftermarket manifolds at a higher power level? I think with the 3.2 pulley, I tested the headers on. That's not a real high power level. Like, it's not 450 or something like that. The Buick V6 starts breaking the stock block when you run over 20 pounds of boost. So 20 pounds of boost on a stock motor would do that? Or 20 pounds of boost on a modified motor, which would be hundreds of more horsepower than that. Weak link for the 3800 are the rod bolts. They stretch and spin a rod bearing. Carlos, could it be detrimental to the engine? I don't know what your first question was. I did change my oil 1,500 miles ago. You can't, having new oil in there would be good. What cam specs are you looking for? Like I said, I was looking for cams in the high 220s, low 230s on the intake at 50. How often do you blow out intake gaskets when testing boost on any motor? I don't know that I've blown out an intake gasket ever. If we break due to rod bolts, we have to pick up a new one and change the rod bolts to ARP to see what goes next. Stretch rod bolts, we're going to test that. Given what we've done with rod bolts in the past on other applications, rod bolt is usually a snatch load thing. It's not a compressive load. A rod bolt could care less about having a turbo on it. That's not going to be a problem, as long as we don't run lots of engine speed. Engine speed is way worse for a rod bolt than a whole bunch of like load on it. And a turbo doesn't dramatically increase the peak cylinder pressure anyway. It just increases the average cylinder pressure. Is the bore spacing on an LS the same, a 3800 same as the LS? I honestly don't know. What are your thoughts on gapless rings? I've only ever used them once on an NA motor. Casey's wanting to replicate the 306 LS deal. Yeah, that it needs better cylinder heads, or a better cylinder head on that 300. That would be cool. Richard, when you got to post the 3800 Big Bang video? After the 3800 Big Bang test happens, that's when the video will go up. Because the test first and then the video. And you know me, I as soon as I do the test, I want to get the video up because I'm all excited about all the information. That 600 horsepower Gen 3 LS spit the rods out to the side. Oh wait, never mind. Yeah, that doesn't happen. Back in the day, TA and Kenny Duttweiler recommended an aftermarket block Buick V6 block when you're running more than 20 psi. Well, here's the thing, and this is why I don't like descriptions given in boost levels, because 20 pounds of boost on a stock motor with a stock cam and stock heads and the stock turbo and all the stock stuff doesn't make very much power. 20 pounds of boost on that same motor with a cam and ported heads and a good intake manifold and a bigger turbo and a better intercooler and lots more fuel, then that makes a lot of horsepower. And then so the load from the 220-pound numbers is dramatically different. And so Kenny Duttweiler's 20 pounds of boost on the motor that he built is different than the average guys, because I've seen lots of guys run 20 pounds on stock motors because they weren't making a lot of power at 20 pounds. But when Kenny Duttweiler puts 20 pounds in something because he has the right cam and heads and all that stuff, it's going to make a lot of power. TA Performance sells a stage 2 block. Edward, hi Richard, turbo boost. If I need 66 to 70 pounds of airflow to make my power level, do I use a bigger turbo that will flow that at 10 pounds or a small turbo at 15 pounds? Well, you need to, what's going to determine that are two things. One is going to be your NA power output. So your NA power output is going to determine where you start from and then how much boost you will need to get. If you're looking at 70 pounds of airflow, you're looking at 700 horsepower because it's an easy calculation. So if you're looking at 700 horsepower and you're starting with 100 horsepower, it's going to take a lot of boost to get there. If you're wanting 700 horsepower and you're starting with 350 or 400, it doesn't take very much boost. And then once you decide, okay, look, I'm starting with 350 and it's going to take 14.5 pounds or 14.7 pounds to get to 700, then you start looking at turbos. Okay, if I want this thing to be in the magic island of efficiency, most guys are outside that. But if I want to be the magic island of efficiency, then I start looking at turbos and go, look, I can make 700 horsepower at whatever boost level you're talking about with this turbo, and I will be at this part of the island. If you want to go through all that, you can. If you just tell me what the motor is and how much power you want to make, I can tell you how to get there. Is O-ring head gaskets outdated now that multi-layer head gaskets are the norm? No, guys still do that for very, very high cylinder pressure stuff. But given what we can do with an MLS head gasket, nobody would do that for most of these motors that you see driving around. Steve Morse's top secret turbo cam grind, soft wide ramp down, keeps valves from bouncing and losing cylinder pressure, claims huge power and longevity. Public can't buy it. So the public can't buy a top secret turbo cam. There are lots of guys that have what you're looking at is and I don't want to take anything away from Steve because he does know what he's doing. But having cam stability is a cam design thing, and lots of people have that ability to do that, not just Steve. And the top secret cam design is, for most of us, for 99% of us, if we look at the camshaft and we have its NA power and then we add boost to that, it's just going to multiply what's there. That's what happens. If you have where the cam design starts becoming critical is in a couple of situations. One, where you're running very, very high boost, especially in a class racing where you're limited by the turbo size. So if if you have to run a 75 millimeter turbo. And so you're maxing the turbo out. You're maxing the hot side out and or the cold side. Then cam timing can become very critical because you're trying to do something very specific. Also, if you're doing max effort stuff, if you're doing very high RPM stuff, the cam stability becomes critical because you can run lots of RPM with a big cam with lots of duration. But if it's not stable up there, it's going to beat the valve train to death. So it's better to give up a few horsepower to get the stability that you need. And that's usually the trade-off. But then ultimately you can make more power because you can run it at a higher engine speed and still have it be stable. So a lot goes into that stuff. But for the kind of cams that we're talking about for a junkyard motor, none of that like comes into play. The Ozman's here on this episode of Speed Secrets. It's all about Richard Holder's favorite cam. I don't have one. It's whatever the next cam is. A bigger engine needs a bigger turbo simply because boost is lower, but still needs to flow the same amount of total airflow per horsepower. Now, the easiest way I can explain it is that the amount of horsepower you get per pound of boost is a direct function of your NA power output. If your NA power makes 450 horsepower, for every pound of boost, you're going to get about 30 horsepower. Now that's what I'm talking about. So I'm doing this video on this 3800 because according to the math, we were getting 30 horsepower and we weren't anywhere near that power level. So, you know, I want to find out what's going on. James, is your 2012, is it a Gen 5 or a Gen 4? If it's a Gen 4 and it's a 5.3, then it's going to be like an LC9 or something like that. And if it's a 6.2, then it could be an L92 or I don't, did they have like L98s and L76s? And but if you go to the Summit Racing deal, they have a bunch of information on all the different variations of the LS family and LT family. And you can look that up and see which in 2012 what that would have come with. Edward, Richard, you know the setup: small block Ford, 331, AFR 185, 274 cam, scat rotating assembly, 400 horsepower. The crank should be 10 to 12 pounds to get 650 to 700 horsepower. Yeah, that all seems right. Is the formula basically the same for double overhead cam? It's not split up. It's the same. Whatever your double overhead, if you're talking about the power and boost formula, whatever your double overhead cam motor makes NA, then it just gets multiplied under boost. Although I've seen instances where some of those motors responded beyond what the formula suggested. Is 80 millimeter T6 too big for an LY6 on a manual car? It depends on what you're trying to do. Size the turbo for two things. One, for your intended power output, whatever power output you're looking for. And then also as a second thing, for whatever kind of response you want. Usually it's a balance between those two things. And he knows what he's asking because he's asking it for a specific reason that has nothing to do with him wanting to know the answer because he already knows the answer. Richard, if we're going to push a 2017 Viper to 15 pounds of boost, considering it had 645 stock NA horsepower, which turbo would you use? Are you going to use twins on that, Kurt, or are you going to use a big single? So you're going to need a turbo that can support obviously 13 or 1400 horsepower. So if you have a single that will do that, or twin Gt45s would actually support that. Are head studs a must on LS turbo engines? I don't think that they're a must. I think that a lot of guys have I've run boost on stock head bolts. But if I was putting one in a car and I was going racing, I would put head studs on it. How come you don't lose mathematically going from a tuned header NA to a cast manifolds into a cramped turbo? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think sometimes we probably do if the exhaust manifolds are bad or the system that you have going to the turbo is bad. But the thing is, even if you lose the equivalent of 1 pound of boost, it's so easy to get it back. Well, wheelbase media, technically 15 pounds would be more than 950. In fact, it would be closer to 970. So are people trying to tell you where to listen? If you have the stethoscope, you can listen. You can listen around for the knock and try to zoom in on it, figure out where it was. Sorry, I was talking about cam specs on a double overhead cam. Where can I find your ignition table for the 351 Big Bang? You won't find it because it's not. I didn't save the file anywhere. What power level do you start seeing issues with stock head gaskets and head bolts on an 0153 LS? I don't know. You'll have to try it and find out. The stock head gaskets a lot of times are an MLS gasket. So the stock head gasket can work fairly well. I would not be worried as much about the head gaskets as I would maybe about the ring gap, because you're obviously not taking the heads off. Can I send you the engine specs for my 350 Trans Am? I think you did already, didn't you? Jay gets censored. Hey, Richard, long-time viewer. Do you recommend leaving the 3800 balancer shaft or removing it if you're just doing bolt-ons and mild boost working on a 3800 Miata? I've never run one without the balance shaft in there. The balance shaft things don't bother me. I like how much smoother the motor is with the balance shaft in place. I've never tried to run one, and I've never tried to run any of the motors under boost without the balance shaft, because I ran the 4.3 with the balance shaft because it was a balance shaft motor, the one that I did, and also the 3800 stuff. Will a BTR Stage 3 NA cam surge or buck in an LS1 trying to cruise at 1500 RPM and overdrive with a lock inverter? I'd say that's a pretty good size cam for that. Hey, Richard, is the small block Chevy crank weak or just the rods? Well, because there are both cast and steel small block Chevy factory cranks, it would depend on which one you're talking about. And there are also different rods for small block Chevys as well. So you'd have to be more specific about which ones you mean. And I've never done a big bang on a small block Chevy, so I don't know where we could go with the stock stuff. And again, it would depend on which stock stuff you're looking at. Have you ever done experiments on removing the quench pad? I haven't done specifically that. I've been wanting to do a test with Brian. We've been talking about doing a softening the chamber test and then testing its sensitivity to detonation. And I think that we need to do that. How much ring gap for a 5.3 everyday driver, low boost? 28 is normally what we put in, something like that. Seven to 7.5 per inch of bore. And if you're really honestly only doing low boost, I wouldn't even mind going less than that. David 3800 guys, delete the balance shafts mainly to clear double roller timing chains. I'd heard that when running heavy valve springs historically. We did change the valve springs on this one, but I kept the single row timing chain only because we do that as a, if we're thinking about a big bang thing, I kind of like to keep as much stock stuff on there as I can. Standard bore, 275 dome, top piston, full floating forge rod, cam specs 248, 242, 109 LSA Sportsman 202. Is this a small block Chevy? And why a reverse pattern cam would be my first question. I wouldn't run a reverse pattern cam. And are these, what heads are these? Are they darts? Richard, do you have an opinion on fish and oil squirters? I'm in favor of them. By the Life Racing, I ran 14 PSI at sick week. I was able to get 1090s, trying to see if I can get 10 O's for a street car without removing the heads. Did you put a camshaft in it? My friend just got a Juke with a stock turbo and is wanting the same feeling on takeoff as his 4-cylinder S10 that he uses for work as lawn service. How would he match a turbo to the engine? You can look at, I was taking a look today at a lot of the compressor maps for the Garrett stuff, and they've got a lot of good information there. Do you know what the NA power output is? How much ring gap do you see on a 200,000 mile LS engine before you gap them? It varies. I've had some that have lots and lots of miles on them like that and have had gaps like in the teens. And then I've had some that have, and it's all the stock stuff because they haven't been overboard or anything. And then I've had some that have even fewer miles than that and have them have a gap in the 20s. So I don't know. There wasn't a direct correlation with mileage. I hate asking an LS question on the 3800. Actually, this is just a question session, so you can ask whatever you want. Modular Forge or Chevy Sprint turbos, if I have any fellow Sprint turbo people out there. I'm building a 60-degree 3.7 Chevy with an intercooled equivalent of an M90, hoping for 400 horsepower. So that shouldn't be a problem if you have that size blower. 400 horsepower wasn't a problem with the M90 that we had. '69 351 Windsor rods have a hole in them to spray the bottom of the pistons? I've never heard that. Working with a Gen 2 supercharged Pontiac, not so much a track car or a daily driver, building the Miata the way it should have come from the factory. I have a sloppy stage 2 by the Life and to put 2 turbos on it. Okay. Well, a sloppy stage 2 and a 5.3 or even a 4.8, going 10 O's on that shouldn't be that hard, right? I don't know what the rest of the car is. Yes, a small block Chevy. I didn't build the engine, got it already from another Trans Am from a guy that put it together. Yeah, the camshaft, I'm not a fan of the cam specs on that thing. Twin T3s on a 5.3 at around what horsepower level does the hot side start becoming restrictive? It depends. You can get T3 hot sides that would work fairly well on a 5.3. Like I have a couple of Turbonetics 5.3 or T3 T4 hybrids that would actually work pretty well. I'm thinking that they would go near 1,000 horsepower. James, thank you very much. And what did you have a question? That's like a crazy amount of money. I asked a Ford modular question: how far can you shoot a plug? Every Ford modular motor that I've ever run has worked perfect, and I've never heard a plug or a thread. So I don't know. Let's see, Richard, have you ever done test documenting on different turbo exhaust trims and ARs? That used to be important back now, and no one seems to discuss it or know about. Well, I think people know about it. If you look at when I was looking at the Garrett site, they have direct back-to-back AR tests, so you can see what it does if that's what you're interested in. The only AR test I've ever done that I remember where all we changed basically was the housing, because we had different housings that just went right on with the existing wheel, is back with my Honda. We had a B16 in a Del Sol, and we used to run the little T3s from the SVO Mustangs and Turbo T-Birds. And then I ran a 0.48 and a 0.63 and also a 0.82. We ran all three of those AR housings on the T3. And the thing that was interesting about that test, and I don't have because it was done on a chassis dyno with my buddy Steve over Powertrain Dynamics, and I would have to go down and get that data. And I don't know if I have any photography on it anymore either to do a video on it. But it was interesting because the AR test made a pretty sizable difference because we had maxed out those turbos. So we'd maxed out the hot side, and then when we put a bigger hot side on, it definitely improved the power output. So, and I wasn't registering back pressure when we did it because we didn't have that hooked up on the chassis dyno, but it did make a decided difference in the power curve, because these were, junkyard turbos that we used to go get from the T-Birds and stuff. What is the stock rod length of a 5.3? It's 598 or something? I'm not sure I missed your answer, but putting PI heads on the first gen 5.4, have you ever tried it? I've never done any testing on a 5.4 2 valve, only 4.6 2 valves, but I can't imagine that it's going to be any different, right? I would love for you to do a 2.2 liter S10 motor, especially that there are headers and other speed parts available for it. Is that the Iron Duke motor? Was the peak power the same with the air swap? I don't think it was. I'm going to see if I might. I don't know if he'll even still have that data. That was like decades ago. That was back in 2000 or something. Do you think I can go back to the stock TPI with that set? No, that's that cam is way too big, and it's not a good cam. You need a small cam for the TPI stuff. 2.5 is the Iron Duke. I'd like to see a 4.62 valve turbo Mustang with 1,000 horsepower. Oh, the 2.2 is a different engine. Okay. What is the bell housing on an Iron Duke? Is he going live tomorrow? Are you talking to me? I try to go live every night. It's live, it's all the way live. The Iron Duke has the Chevy TWD bell housing, same as the 2.8 V6, the 3800, except so I have a 3800 bell housing. I honestly don't remember ever looking for one, but I don't know if I've ever seen an Iron Duke. Was that the 4-cylinder that came in the? Did it come in Camaros and Firebirds too? Franklin, I have a Gen 3 4.8. I'm going to drop some Gen 4 4.8 rods and pistons. What do you recommend me to do to get this done right? Well, there is an imbalance when you do that, and some guys don't care about it and just do it. Please remind us of the definition of the Big Bang motors. For me, the Big Bang motor is what the original one started out as. Is I wanted to find out how much, I want to find out how much power the stock bottom end would take, how much power the stock block, the stock crank, the stock rods, the stock pistons. And in those cases, I just reused the stock rings that were in the motor from the wrecking yard. I took the motor apart, we put ring gap in it, we cleaned it, and then I put it back together. I think on the first two, I resurfaced the deck of we put better heads on it because I didn't want to just do a stock motor because I don't care about that. I wanted this thing to make a big number, and I was only trying to find out what the strength of the bottom end was. I didn't care about the strength of the heads or that kind of thing. So I usually put good heads, a good cam, good intake, so that in addition to finding out whatever that power level, people want to talk about boost level, but it's not really boost. It's a power level, and ostensibly it's a torque level, how much it would actually take. And so how much will that take? Because a lot of guys, there was, back when I did the first 4.8, what turned out to be a 4.8, everyone's saying, oh, you can't run more than 8 pounds of boost, or these are 10 pounds of boost. They'll break a piston. The pistons are terrible. Same thing they said about all the Hemi stuff. Oh, those are made of glass. Well, yeah, if you detonate them, they are. They don't like that. Neither do LS motors. And so I wanted to find out how much you could actually do it if you did it correctly. So putting ring gap in it, head studs, good head gaskets, good tune, cold air. We had on the later ones, we had ice water on those. On the first two, we did not. Had a good air to water intercooler. We had more than enough turbo. We had 2 turbos on it. And you can run a lot of power with the stock bottom end. And that's all I wanted to find out. And that's what the Big Bang motors are, finding out what basically the stock bottom end will do. S10 Fieros. The first Big Bang was too much fun. We had to block the blow off out to hold enough boost. I remember trying that. Chad Reynolds is in the house. Everyone say hi to Chad. And I remember Ernie's wife calling me all kinds of names because I wouldn't turn the boost up high enough. And then we eventually did. Then she was okay. Is a GT45 a good match for a responsive 3800? I'm considering one for my 3.7 liter inline 5 Atlas motor. It is if you want something that would go to 700 or 800 horsepower. Otherwise, I think I would pick a 3582. Yes, Christine is awesome. So Chad, make sure that you go in and vote on the poll. Should I port a set of 3800 V6 heads before I do the Big Bang test on them? Heard of splash stone epoxy for reshaping intake runners? I've seen people epoxy runners in cylinder heads. I would be really leery of that, given the vibration and stuff that's going on. I wouldn't want pieces of that coming out. And maybe it's okay. Maybe it works. I mean, see guys use it. The GT45 is limited to 45 PSI. Is that the 45 in it? Is the GT35, will it do 35 PSI? So does that mean an S475 will do 475 pounds of boost? Because it would be nice if it works out like that. Should I get a Junkyard 8.1 to put in my dually, or build something more dedicated to put a turbo on? I thought that you were going to do a, I thought that your idea was to do like a 5.3 with a turbo on it and tow with that. But there's, Mike Davis came into West Tech and he's got a 3500 with an 8.1 in it, a dually with a turbo on it. And he's driven it for like umpteen million miles. So I would say yes. The answer is always should. If the question is should I put a big block in, the answer is yes. But then the second answer is yes, but with boost. Can we get a video on Portworx? I'm not the guy to do a video on Portworx because I'm not really very good at porting. Although I have to say, my first time porting, I did increase the airflow, so I didn't go backwards. That's pretty good. I have not sent the 3800 heads to Eric, so I kind of don't want to ask him to do the iron heads. Oh, the S475 does 47.5 pounds of boost. That's not good. I thought it did 475 pounds of boost. So Racer D is saying that splashdown epoxy will never come out, and the never is in caps. So then you know that that's true. Sadly, if you hear any spending time around Ford guys, I will hear such atrocities. About what? What is the thing that they will say? K series Honda also passed my test. Did you ever see a guy who stuck a huge train blower on his big block Chevy and blew the head gaskets out just idling? That sounds like a bit of an internet myth, because how do you build boost at idle? And if you were building boost at idle, you'd be building it into closed throttle blade, so it'd never go into the motor. Do you know what rear-wheel drive works with the 3800? Yeah, the Camaro and Firebirds have rear-wheel drive versions of the 3800. That's where we got the bell housing from. So that's an easy fix. According to all data, the LS4 has the same bell housing as a 3300 and a 3800 Buick V6. So I could run an LS4 then? I figured Eric would not take my call again if I asked him to do the iron heads. I know that he stepped up and said he would, but I just don't want to put him through that. Ported 317s, flow 305, maybe more. I think the ones that I had flowed what the ported 799 and 243 heads, I think that they were in the 320 to 330 range, because I used 317s on one of the Big Bang motors. The LS4 has the GM front-wheel drive bell housing, same as the Northstar 3800. But then I don't know if there's any benefit running an LS4 other than, and we already tested that, the LS4 intake manifold, because we know that that's not good. The guy who I had this engine for was TPI, but it was ported with bigger injectors. That's all okay, but that's not a good camshaft. That's a big camshaft for a tune port motor. The camshaft, the duration numbers that you gave me are just way too big to work with a tune port motor. Those cam specs want to run at like 6,500 RPM, and a tune port wants to run at 4,500 RPM. And you could put it in there and you could make it drive around and stuff. It's just not going to work very well. Rudolph, what was your comment? A Big Bang North Star. I do see a lot of North Stars in the wrecking yard. Although I'm scared that I see the North Stars in the wrecking yard because because of the North Star and not because the cars are crashed. Ooh, Valley Head Service. That's OG. Iron Dukes out of an AMC are Chevy patterns. Cool. Can you explain compression height of the piston? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, Valley Head Service is going way back, and so is Racing Head Service, but they had resurrected that name though. The Big Bang is when we ran basically just put 2 turbos on an LS and to see how much power it would take before it went bang. Who's the next special guest on the channel? What do we have to look forward to coming up? I'm going to be doing videos, interview videos with people, but they won't be live though, I don't think. Yeah, you can't fact check. There's no fact checking in bench racing. That's why you do bench racing, because you that's strictly like you leave that outside. Richard, I have an 07. Okay, 2 more minutes. Richard, I have an 07 Silverado 1500 with an L76. I would like to run a BTR Truck Norris cam in it, but don't want to get rid of the VVT. You can't do that. Have I seen the video of the guy adapting LS heads to the 351? Yep. And also 351 heads on the 300 inline 6-cylinder too. Is boring it from a 6.0 to a 6.2 worth it? I have not made a video on that, and most people don't do that on 6-liter blocks because I'm told that the cylinder wall gets too thin, but I haven't actually tried it. People do make VVT camshafts, but the Truck Norris is not a VVT camshaft. Cameron, we have a Series 2 at Pick and Pull with a blower on it. Still is going to get the blower off. Should I pull the heads and port them to the best of my ability and send them to you? Let me see what I'm going to do with these heads first. Some dynos lie too. The dyno doesn't lie. The dyno operator might do that. How much of a difference does port matching and intake to heads make? Is it worth it? I haven't had somebody show me yet where that made power. I want it to, but I just haven't seen it yet. I did, and Tyler, I did, and this will be the last question. I did flow test the heads that I had done, and they didn't really flow any more than the ones that I did, or the one port that I did. So I was just a little disappointed. I know somebody else out there can do a much better job. I could have done a better job if I would have wanted to do the heads. I just didn't want to do them because I'm not a porter, and I don't want that my first thing to be something that I'm going to be running a big bang on. I know that there are people out there that are talented and qualified to be able to do that, and I would yield to them. Just like if I was building a roll cage, I know how to weld, but I wouldn't do that. I would have somebody do that that's a professional at doing that. And it's the same thing with porting. I would rather have somebody that knows what they're doing, port it, and get numbers that are going to be 225, 230, 235, whatever. And then hopefully, you know, make lots of power. Okay. Yeah, iron heads. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm going to be, as soon as I get off, I'm going to be loading up the other video on the 3800 stuff so you guys can discuss that tomorrow. We can take a look and see what's going on and try to figure out if maybe the NA motor just didn't make enough power, and next time I put it on, it's going to make power. I don't really think that that's the case unless we change something. But why it was making so much power under boost, you know, it just wanted to be turbocharged is what I think. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, and you guys can let me know. Thank you all for showing up, and I will see you all tomorrow. Wait, you guys got to remind me. I got to close out the poll. So 70% are saying yes to get the heads done. So obviously we got to do something with that. I will see you guys all tomorrow.